Well, my name is Warren Bell, and if you were coming to this presentation, you're in the right room. If you thought it was going to be different, this is what it is. And so, time to leave. I'm not just going to talk about solar energy today. I will be talking about it, of course. The Shuswap Solar Energy Society would fire me if I didn't say something about that, and my huge wages of nothing would disappear. But I am going to talk about solar energy in the context of energy production and use in general, because there are some myths about renewable energy that we need to address if we're going to be rational and live in the 21st century. So, am I audible in the far reaches of this space? I see nodding heads from the back row. Somebody prompted you, or else you actually heard me. So, the organization that I'm representing today is called the Shuswap Solar Energy Society. And that's our logo, designed by one of our members. And if you see that anywhere, you know our presence is not far away. Now, I've showed this slide before because it really is evocative. It tells you something about why solar energy is so useful and powerful. Now, the big yellow disk is the energy coming from the sun. It's astonishing. It's 23,000 terawatts. That's billion watts, or it might even be trillion watts, actually. Trillion watts per year. Huge. And you can see it's bigger than all the other disks. The ones up the right-hand side are conventional sources of energy: coal, uranium for nuclear energy, petroleum, natural gas, and wind. Wind is now becoming somewhat conventional. But this is what we use every year, 16 terawatts. So we got a lot of spare energy available to us. Now, mind you, coal and petroleum, natural gas, and to a great extent wind are all subgroups of solar energy. I mean, the sun heats the earth and it makes some parts hotter and some parts cooler, and the wind blows from one place to another. Coal and oil and gas were all created about 230 million years ago when the Permian extinction took place, and something like 90% of the critters on this planet died and were buried and turned into these various substances. But you can see we still have a lot of extra. This slide is familiar to everybody. The cost of solar has gone down. The range of installations has gone up, and solarizing of many, many facilities and settings in the world is taking place. Now, if you want to get updated and inspired about solar energy, this is the guy you should go to. Tony Seba is an economist who's a lecturer at Stanford University, and just about everything he's writing these days pretty well much bring you up to speed on the incredibly rapid advance of solar energy. Now, solar energy is cheaper than oil, gas, and hydro-generated electricity in California, Chile, and a number of other countries, most of them sunny, which of course helps. But it's 2.3 cents per thousand per kilowatt hour versus 5 to 7 cents up to 10 cents with conventional sources. So it's cheaper, but as you'll see, it's not a cost-free alternative. At any rate, Tony Seba, look him up. Everything that I didn't say today about solar energy, he has said, and far more eloquently. And I just want to bring this home a little bit. All of us in this room, I bet, at one point in time, had a power outage. Remember that? Ours was about 36 hours, and it was interesting. We got about 14 degrees in the house when the power came back on. And that's us right there. But this points out one of the big vulnerabilities of conventional energy sources, and that is that they're all hooked up together in one giant linkage. And if breaks in that linkage take place, and we're at the other end of the break, we're immediately in trouble. And what solar energy and other renewable sources offer, which, by the way, was present 100 years ago with other sources of energy, but what is now offered by these new sources is you can have your own source. You can have solar panels on your roof. You can have a battery hanging in your garage. It's not cheap, but you can do it, and you can say goodbye to BC Hydro. Now, a lot of people would like to say goodbye to BC Hydro, but I must point out that BC Hydro has been on the short end of a very long stick, which was to get Hydro to take out loans and then take the money from the loans and use them to balance the provincial budget. And that, you may have heard, it's just reported that ICBC has been safeguarded against that happening in the future, because that's the same thing happened with ICBC. It's got $1 billion in debt because the provincial government of the day took the money and used it to balance its books. So Hydro is in a bit of a pickle. It's got an even larger indebtedness load than ICBC, and that's changing their attitude. It's made them less sensitive to grassroots initiatives because it's struggling with its own financial internal stuff. Now, solar installations can be substantial, and this is one of the largest in the world. It's in Morocco, and as you'll see in a moment, it's sizable. And it's installations like this that have given us a very narrow view of solar energy. All we have to do is put up solar panels everywhere, and where we don't have solar panels, put up wind turbines everywhere else. And where we don't have any of those, then geothermal will do it, or something will do it. Some new energy source. But in fact, I'll show you some statistics that show that that's a short-sighted way of looking at things. And it lets us all off easily, because it means we don't have to change anything. We just put a couple of solar panels on the roof, battery in the garage, and then continue using energy without thought for tomorrow. It's not quite like that. So that's the sober second thought. I'm borrowing that from the Senate of Canada, sober second thought. So this is an article by somebody who is by no means not in favor of renewable energy. Andrew Nikiforuk has written some very, very critical articles about the fossil fuel industry and how it has become entitled and has done some horrible things to a whole range of people just because it's so huge. It also gets massive amounts of subsidies from the federal government, 800 million in BC and up to $2.5 billion in subsidies across Canada. So what Andrew Nikiforuk is saying, renewables alone are not the solution to the climate problem that we're facing. It's a big problem, and it's bigger than just replacing fossil fuels with renewable. I want to make that clear in a moment. Here's some quotes from the article. First of all, a professor who said, if we really wanted zero carbon emissions by 2050, that's getting rid of all the fossil fuel, then we'd have to build and deploy, put them out in place, 1,500 wind turbines on about 300 square miles every day for the next 30 years. Now, if any of you in this room think that's a plausible notion, please hold your hand up. No, sorry. Everybody else who thinks that is implausible, please hold your hand up, because I don't want to single the one person out who's not listening. Okay. So here's another quote. To provide solar power for everyone using this, the solar array, like the one in Morocco I just showed you, $315 billion in a huge area. Now, it's not really huge. That's 87.5 kilometers by 10 kilometers, a strip. But it's a lot of hardware. And to make that hardware work, you need raw materials. And those raw materials would be absolutely stupendous in volume and size. So here's the part where you may all want to leave the room because it doesn't sound like that much fun. We have to start thinking about slowing down our consumption, not building again and again, enlarging, expanding. Every time I hear people talk about progress and development, all I can think of is when I look at the planet Earth or pictures of it, it's a round blob in the middle of space and there's no extra room. It's a fixed unit. And a fixed unit to constantly expand what they call our footprint, especially our ecological footprint, is madness. And many, many people have said this. Bill Rees, the guy who invented with Matthijs Wackernagel, his student, they developed the ecological footprint concept, which is a measurement of land space that we need to supply our needs and to take the waste that we discharge. We're now up to 2.5 planets worth of demand on the resources of the Earth. So if we're doing 2.5 times more on this planet and using 2.5 times more resources than we actually have, think of a bank account. You know, you got $100 and you just wrote a check for 250. Well, in the bank, they just close your account, fine you some dough, and you're back in business. But in a planet, it's not so simple. So that's why we have to be sober and think about it again. Sober second thought. So just apart from the consumption of resources, there's also what's right. What would we put up with if someone did it to us? You know, do unto others, etc., the golden rule. Well, many of the minerals that we would use in solar energy and in wind energy come from other places in the world. And just to magnify that paragraph there are existing human and environmental risks with supply chains. And you know, just making batteries, you don't make them out of air, you make them out of minerals that are coming from somewhere, and they often come from somebody else's home. And though people in that home may not be treated very well by their own governments. Our government allows us to do all sorts of things, but many other governments are very restrictive or very exploitative. And we aren't even that good at it ourselves. Just see what happened with Wet'suwet'en in the last while. So we've got a lot of lessons to learn. And one of them is that we just can't keep on expanding consumption. And this is pointing out the fact that in some countries, the governance system, the government itself, is not always very sensitive to the needs of its own citizenship. And here's another panel of some of the minerals that are used in solar, but primarily in solar energy. And you can see just cobalt. Oh, by the way, if it's dark blue, they have good governance. If they have very poor governance, it's pale, white almost, fairly poor, not great, good. A little fraction of dark blue for good and a huge area for not so good. That's cobalt. Here's another mineral. This is gallium. It's a rare earth mineral, and it's used, and you can see there's almost every place it's produced is from a place that has very poor governance or poor governance. In other words, we'd be taking out of the mouths and the lives of people in other parts of the world things that we would never put up with someone taken away from us. So that's the do unto others as we would have them do unto you. And one more, this is the one everybody, well, sorry, that's tin. But lithium is up here somewhere. There's lithium. It's actually okay, because actually a lot of lithium comes from Canada. So we consider ourselves well governed, relatively speaking. All right. So this is just an image of a community in Argentina where things are not so nicely done. And the local population has risen up against the extraction of these minerals because it's done without their permit, their consent, and without any benefits to them. They get a few jobs working at horrible things in the mines, and that's it. So people are starting to think about this whole business of ethics more seriously. And this is one website called The Ethical Consumer, which if you want to inform yourself about what's acceptable and what's not, this is a site, it's British, and so it's not just got an American slant. Everything in Canada gets a little bit shifted over to the US side of the border. It's a really good site where it covers the world. And one of the things I found on it was this. These are all the major manufacturers of solar panels in the world, and Canadian Solar, the biggest one in Canada, is right up near the top in terms of ethical values, which was kind of nice to see because they're well known, but they're not like Mitsubishi. Well, Mitsubishi loves to make nuclear power plants and a few other things that really aren't appropriate for the 21st century. But to see a Canadian company represented all the way across the Atlantic means that they're listening on the other side, but also means that we've been doing some good things on this side.
What's their name?
Canadian Solar.
Oh,
Pretty easy. Canadian Solar. It's called CB, it's a British company, I think. And it's CB Sol solar panels. It's from Great Britain, and it got, not surprising, it's a British website. And the second one is Solar World solar panels, and I can't see where it's from because the red square I put on there is crossing over top of it. But, you know, down here is Mitsubishi with a score of 4, okay? Now, we have used, I know people who use Mitsubishi panels because they're very good. Technically, they're very good. But the price that is paid in blood and sweat and poverty in other parts of the world is significant. We can't afford anymore to act as if that's irrelevant. Because sooner or later, somebody's going to do it to us. And right now, we're learning about our indigenous population and the fact that they have had this done to them. They've been receiving the number 4 treatment for a couple of 100 years. So we can't do that anymore. All right, so this is about wind. Just I thought I'd throw a little remark about wind. You know, there's lovely turbines with the blades that turn. Well, the blades are made out of absolutely incredibly unrecyclable material. It's kind of like, you know, Tetra Paks on a giant scale. You've got plastic, you've got metal, you've got cellulose, you've got all sorts of, and they're all glued together so that they don't come apart. And that allows them to have flexibility and be like a single unit because it's so tightly glued together. But they're impossible, as they are now constructed, to recycle. So this is a picture of, you know, this particular small town in the States. I can't remember where it was, but Casper, okay? You've all heard of Casper somewhere in the States. Anyway, not the ghost. This is, these are the actual veins. And their landfill site, you know, even if they chop them up, they'll fill up their landfill site with 1 load. So how many people before today had thought about that issue of what do you do when a wind turbine is falling apart? Have you? Yeah, it's not on our agenda, and yet it's part of the real world. So, just to show how progressive our federal government is, I was just nosing around one day and I was looking for things like social responsibility. This is the Statistics Canada website. What do they have in the way of studies of social responsibility issues? 0. And the last one was, where is it now here? 2004 or something like that. And there's another one here. This is ethical consumption, the thing that I've just been talking about. Last article, January 25th, 2011, none since then. And then this one is the environment. When was the last article the Statistics Canada assembled? March 21st, 2006. So, yeah, right, that's right. We're poised for massive social transformation. And when you do that, you can't do it lightly and you can't do it carelessly. Well, we've embraced renewable energy because it seemed so easy. Shut down the oil wells, build solar arrays and wind turbines, maybe some geothermal, some tidal power, a few other things, but that's going to solve the problem. Well, as it turns out, it isn't going to solve the problem. It's going to create a whole new set of problems. So, let's go to bottom lines. So we have to get a handle on our energy use. We have to know how much and in what form we're actually using it. If we don't know that, we're shooting in the dark. I always say if there's a bad guy in a room of people, one way to solve the problem is go in with an AK-47 and just fire away, and you're going to get them. But you're going to do a lot of collateral damage. And collateral damage in the 21st century is no longer acceptable. You know, a war, well, we happened to kill a bunch of peasants, we killed a bunch of innocent bystanders, but we got the bad guy. Nobody's going to live with that anymore. So, first point, get a handle on what we're using. Remember that fossil fuels are going to be phased out. They've been 150 years, more or less, the basis of our society in the industrial West. but they're what's called a sunset industry. Sunrise industries are the ones coming in, sunset industries are the ones going out. But we can't just stop them all today or tomorrow, but they're going. Renewable energy sources will play an important part in the transition. So don't go out of this room thinking that I'm just subverting the entire message of the Solar Energy Society. What I'm saying is it's just not so simple. And this is probably what we all have to think of. I hope you do think about this. I hope you go away a little obsessed about what do I do every day with the stuff I buy and the stuff I use and the stuff I throw away and the stuff I think about buying and then say, well, maybe I shouldn't, but maybe I will. Too expensive. Well, it's not just the cost, it's in dollars. It's the cost in planetary damage.
There is no place called away.
Yes, indeed. There is no other planet. So this confronts us with the biggest challenge that we as humans have ever faced, and that is starting to really think hard about how we live our lives. Now, if you thought you'd hear more about solar energy and you're disappointed, that's okay. But I hope you understand that this is actually putting solar energy and renewable energy in general into a real world context. It's not against solar energy or against renewable energy, but it's saying don't be casual about it. Don't be careless about it. So, this is one site you can go to where you can learn about what is really an important issue that is part of this context, and that is increasing energy efficiency. You know, you've got $50 in the bank and you want to buy 5 things and you can squeeze it into the $50, but if it's over the $50, you can't do it all. You have to do some of it, but not all of it. It's that kind of decision-making process that we all are confronted with. And don't think I'm not confronted with it too. I am not lecturing you. I'm lecturing myself, and you just happen to be hearing me talk to myself about what I know I have to do. It's not, you know, audience speaker. It's a room full of people reflecting on things. So anyway, this is a place, it's sponsored by the federal, the provincial, Hydro, Fortis BC. Yeah, well, they've done some good things too. They're all in on it, and they're all thinking about it, and they're helping us think about it. So, here's some things we can and or must do. Because, you know, walking out of here feeling depressed and miserable and thinking, I wish I hadn't gone to that, I was feeling really good when I got up this morning, is not my intent. It's for you to leave here with some thoughts about actions you can take in your own lives, which I'm trying desperately to take in mine. So, first, we need to talk more about these things. You know, not just, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. You know, like think to ourselves, but actually stand up and say to somebody in your life, your spouse, your kids, your friends, your extended family, your colleagues in a workplace, what about this stuff? You know, I was thoroughly depressed at Sea Savers and I need help. So would you talk to me, please? Or I'm inspired and I want to really do something constructive about these issues. The idea of sort of learning, I mean, my profession we went to medical school, we graduated, and then we just did whatever we did after that. And somebody noticed at a certain point that that wasn't working very well, because especially when technology and science is changing things rapidly, you just can't go to school and learn it and then do it. You have to keep on learning and upgrading constantly. That's an important point. So if you browse the internet, don't feel bad. Just browse around issues that really you think matter to you. Learn more about the world you live in, because it's a wonderful world. It's fabulous. It's That's why Canadians talk about the weather all the time, because it's always different. But somebody once said, the weather's always changing, but it pays no attention to the rest of us. So there's something to be said that we can learn from weather. We have to let go. We have to stop saying, okay, those folks or this idea, yeah, it doesn't work for me. We have to be ready to revisit things and not use things that we know aren't working anymore and replace them with better things. So in the case of energy, yes, you might have a solar panel or two, but you might also do a lot of insulating. I've got a bunch of, at our display, the Shuswap Society display, I called a lot of things about energy efficiency for your home and your business. So there's a lot of things you can do to change things around. People say the one thing you should learn in school is how to engage in critical thinking. Critical thinking isn't negative thinking. I'm going to criticize you. It's not that. It's thinking, what kind of a person are you? And how could you and I have a reasonable relationship that you would find was okay and I would find was okay without offending either of our values? That's the kind of critical thinking, not just, oh yeah, we've always done it this way, so let's keep on doing it, but more like, we've always done it this way, but why have we always done it this way? I tell you, I have more fun using the digital resources of this world, going online and somebody says, this person said this. So I look up the person, find out if they even have been recorded by anybody. And we're recorded a lot more than we think we are. If you think nobody knows about you on the internet, just put your name in and click, you'll find out. If you ever said anything in a public place, you're there. So you go through the step, you say, okay, there's an idea, and then you find out who the person is, and then you find out whether the idea is shared by anybody else. And sometimes you find out that there's a whole world of people thinking about an idea you'd never heard of before, or a technology you didn't know even existed. It doesn't mean it's great. You might find in the end that it's actually, nobody actually found it working. Hula hoops have not caught on. This is a really important point. Nobody's on the sidelines anymore. There was a time when you could be a nice, innocent bystander, and people would say, oh, well, he was totally quiet and friendly and inoffensive, and I don't know a thing about him, but he lived next door for 10 years. Then you find out he had 3 young women in chains in the basement. It doesn't mean that everybody you don't know has done that. But I'm just bringing forward the point that if we don't learn, if we don't explore, and we don't especially allow other people to come to us and us go to them in exchange, we'll end up marginalizing somebody. Now, we've been good at marginalizing people. Everybody knows about indigenous people in this part of the world. But we've marginalized half the world's population, women. We've marginalized children, to be seen and not heard. What a line, to be seen and not heard. For crying out loud, whoever thought that was a good idea? I'm going to look it up on the internet and find out who it was and send a nasty note to their descendants. You're too good, you're too smart for your own good? No. We've set children aside. Somebody once said, teaching a child is not filling a pail, it's lighting a fire. Well, the fire's already lit. You just have to fan the flames and make that child's brilliant capacities come to the surface. So there's nobody on hold. There's nobody sitting on the sidelines. We're all here. Be brave. Be bold. Doesn't mean outwardly. You can just be brave inside and do things you've never done before. Speak up or act in ways you haven't done before. And as I said earlier, we're going through a massive transformation. So that's what we're here. If you're living now, you can't get another life. You can't get another planet, and you can't get another life. This is the life you have to live. So now is the time to act. This is the whole business about how we use our material wealth gifts, whatever. We have to do them not just to advance our own personal narrow agenda, but in advancing our agenda in ways that help other people's agenda. It used to be, you know, a nice thing to do, help other people. Now it's a survival tactic. It's a different thing. So there's one last admonition, which is a little hard to read. Anyway, take breaks, look after our own health and well-being, and rejoice every day in something joyful and good. I'll just briefly mention 3 positive things. It's a psychological thing that was developed in the eastern states in the university after about 15 years of research on burnout. And they found that if people, before they went to bed, for 2 weeks, focused on 3 positive things in their lives, it didn't have to be great stuff, just focused on 3 positive things, it changed their mood more than any antidepressant that's ever been measured. And they actually compared the statistical results to chemical antidepressants. And it lasted for a full year. So that's me, and that's this. So there we are. End of presentation. Thank you. So we got 35 minutes. If anybody has a question, or you don't have to stay here for the full thing, but if anybody has any questions.
Thanks for your talk.
Sorry, just a sec. We actually have a microphone.
Oh, okay.
The microphone.
Hi, it's not on, I don't think.
We have a silent
maybe it is.
microphone.
It is a silent.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
So-
So I appreciate your talk, and obviously there's a lot of wisdom there. What I have is an opportunity. I've got an old building that's being turned into a legal carriage home, secondary home. It's 480 square feet. It's got a small footprint. It's going to have lots of insulation, but it doesn't need a lot. But we're looking at having heat and cooling probably still needed because it's Kelowna. Fridge, freezer, hot water, those basic things to live in it. What path forward would you say? I mean, you insulate it really well, but can solar provide for that enough? It's a question. We can go any direction. I'm trying to finish.
I think the place you have to start, if you live in this century, is to make the energy requirements of your building as small as possible. And there's you mentioned insulation. Insulation is cheap, and yet it's incredible. Like something like a quarter of your heat in your building goes up through your ceiling. Now, if you insulate it with 18 inches of bats or cellulose, which is flame retardant, there's ways to make that diminish. And there's simple things. The more you read, the more you find out. Like planting trees around your place so that, I know that's a forest fire hazard, but if they're deciduous, it's not. And deciduous trees lose their leaves in the winter, and they get them back in the spring when the weather starts to warm up. We have a giant chestnut tree in front of the west face of our house, and it's like an air conditioner. We have 7 or 8 degrees difference in outside temperature compared to indoors. So seal cracks, put in lots of insulation, face your house so that it has passive gain, a big overhang where the sun comes in, and lots of opportunity for what they call passive heating of surface like slabs of stone or whatever. I mean, the only thing that's limiting you is your willingness to look. But I can't in a few minutes give you anything more than a smattering of ideas. But the farther you look, the more you'll realize. The UBC has built a 100% zero energy building, UBCO in Kelowna. So you can ask the folks there. They will say, this cost us that much, and that cost us this much, and you can do this or that.
Yeah, my problem is it's a pre-existing structure and a pre-existing site, so there's some lack of flexibility.
And you're doing a wonderful thing by resurrecting an old war
Oh yeah,
horse.
there's
Thank you.
capital use of natural capital. That's
Yeah,
there.
one of the people who's talked a lot about the future is that it was in The Guardian. They had 4 things you can do. 4 things you can do. The first thing was don't knock down any more buildings. Rebuild them, reshape them, rehabilitate them. If they fall down, that's different. But if they're still standing, there's so much more that we can do.
I'm not an authority on it. I don't know that much about it, but I helped someone hook up 18 solar panels, and in their house, they use gas for their propane for their stove. You cannot, if you use a microwave, if you use your dryer, it'll just suck the solar panels, and you got to have batteries. So that is an added problem that I've seen, and this guy knows it. And he says, and his wife said today, I don't know if I'd do the same thing again. So I don't know, I'll just throw that out for whatever it's worth.
And then what is the province doing about buying back energy?
They used to give you 10 cents for every kilowatt hour beyond what you used over a year. I've been trying to decipher whether they've reinstated that, because I've gone to the Hydro website and they make it sound like nothing ever happened. But in April of 2018, they cut out that rebate. You could offset your own use, but if you produce more than you used over a year, then they stopped paying you 10 cents, well, 9.9 cents. Now, it seems like they might have reinstated it, but they put size limits. Hydro is the name says it, BC Hydro. They're not an energy company, they're a dam building company. So they're building Site C, even though the economics of Site C are pathetic. And the well, they're not doing that. But there's a lot of, what I'm saying in this room is something that probably maybe is said to some degree in the boardrooms of large corporations, but then they say, but that will interfere with our bottom line, so they put out. The fossil fuel industry knew all about climate change before any of us did, and they wrote and spoke about it, and then they realized big effect on the bottom line, and then they started to go the opposite direction and promote climate denial. So there's backstories here. Everybody's looking satiated.
No, one question. I mean, I think in Salmon Arm you've had a project that you did with the United Church, is it? And I was at your start up for that, but at the very beginning, and now it exists, and there's a story there.
Yeah, the art gallery in Salmon Arm has a solar array built by the city, because it's a city building. And there are two other potential sites that the city will put it on. They're all considered pilot projects. There's still a kind of a lethargy and an unwillingness to really stretch oneself within some of the staff in the city. They're like everybody else. We've done it this way for decades. Why should we change? And so one of the things we do in the Solar Society is we nag them and find sympathetic ears and whisper in them. And so some changes have taken place. But it's a slow process, but it has to happen. We don't have any, as the woman who was here before is gone now, she said there's no other place for us to live.
I had the distinction of having a son-in-law. He's an electrician. He has a crew of 35, and they're working on the Site C dam, and they work on the wind turbines, doing all the electrical. So now, what conversation do I have with him?
Probably a difficult one.
Yeah.
I have patients who go up and work in the tar sands. But you look at their competing priorities. They don't have any job. They haven't had a job for maybe 3 years. It's the only job available for them with their skills. So that's where they go. We have to transform the people who offer jobs to other people. Because if someone says, we're going to build this, like Alberta's building the biggest solar array in Canada, private, which is an issue, but they're building the biggest solar array. Well, this is in Jason Kenney country, where he's got a $30 million war office to try and attack anybody who says rude things about the fossil fuel industry. Under his nose, on his watch, the largest solar array in Canada is being built. So the idea, if somebody says to you, this can't work, or this new idea will never catch on, even though it's brilliant, don't pay any attention. I don't mean you pay attention, but don't be discouraged and think that they know the inner truth. They know their point of view. But all the time, as we're sitting in this room, various vested interests, of which the fossil fuel industry is only one, the tobacco industry, there's other industries as well. They're all churning out public relations documentation to try and make us stay where we're at, because that's the system from which they derive their revenue. So we have to persuade them they can derive revenue from other systems, We have to tell them that if they keep on doing what they're doing, it's not going to be a happy time. We have to show them by example, say, these people over here did this. Why can't you do it over where you are now? All of those kinds of things. So, you know, the Site C Dam, I've hung around the Site C Dam for a while looking at it with some people from the area. And the more you look at it, the more it looks like a white elephant. And yet, BC Hydro can't bring itself to, you know, let go of its project. So it has to take all of us speaking out, learning more about why it is a white elephant, and then you can have these conversations with your son-in-law.
Or
The biggest thing we face is what?
these billionaire or billion-dollar, multi-million-dollar corporations who won't let go of their money, and you know, and we're the small guy trying to set up a business. It just seems like to just be shot in the wind.
I had this conversation with my wife the other day, and she pointed out that if you gave most of us $1 billion to play with, we would remarkably quickly become like, unless we had real self-control, start to do the things that these billionaires now are doing. And that means we have to imagine ourselves having $1 billion and saying firmly, I will not do that. But that takes years of practice. Did you want to say that? We're running out of time, and the crowds are beating at the door. Not. But anyway, that's okay. There is a certain timeliness. It's 15:15. And that
Time for
allows-
one more question, if there is one. If
One
not-
more question.
Yeah,
One more.
sure. May I comment? Sorry, for this lady? Oh, sorry. Is, especially in a small place like that might be a good place to put in a ductless heat pump, partly because you're in Kelowna, you possibly need air conditioning despite all the passive devices, and their efficiency can be like 300%. So for every kilowatt of electricity, you get 300% worth of cooling or the winter heating. So
that's a ductless.
Douglas, especially for a small place like that. So a colleague of mine built an alleyway house, which I think is a lot bigger than 400 square feet, and he's put in a ductless heat pump, and he's just analyzing the power bills to try and figure out how much energy used, and it wasn't much. And he also built it as passively house equivalent as he could, and then that's his only source of heat and cooling.
Heat pump can be very useful, geothermal can be very useful. With all of these, the same necessity for critical thinking, you know, the size of the building, the energy demands of the building. The first step that all of us need to take is to try and reduce the energy requirements of not just our buildings, but of our daily lives. You know, every time I drive twice downtown in my gas-powered vehicle, which I haven't replaced because the amount of energy used to replace a vehicle is huge, so I'm clinging and taking my foot off the gas pedal once in a while. You know, I mean, these analytical, self-reflective discussions have to be going on a lot. So there we are, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.